Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's Friday. Is this so? I'm trying to think. Today is actually uh, the um, the summer solstice. Would you call this the anti-Christmas? I guess because Christmas is the shortest day of the year, and here we are at the longest day of the year. Well, okay, I shouldn't say Christmas. I should say the winter solstice. But that's what that's all about. But anyway, good morning, everyone. Uncle Devin here, or Uncle D. Welcome to Evolving with Uncle D. I am your host, the one and only Uncle D. I'm glad that you are able to be here. I hope you all are safe. I sure hope you are somewhere where there's some cool air. It is hotter than July out there right now. And all is good here. If you hear some noise, I think we should be good. But out of all days, they decided to change the lead pipes outside of my house. I'm grateful for it because we don't have to pay for it, but I have to go through all that. But just want to welcome everyone to my many different social media platforms. Today, I'm going to have a conversation with you. Um, I'm going to start talking a little bit about the politics of religion. There's a lot that's going on. And for many of us, whether you are religious or not, we are impacted by those who have political power and their particular understanding of religion. And then we're going to talk a little bit about that in just a minute. So I'm gonna wait about one more minute, then we're going to jump right on in. And I'm going to be making some references to a book that I wrote, 2002 book that I wrote. I will share more with you about that and the importance of it. We're going to talk a little bit about health. We're going to talk a little bit about all aspects of health, but certainly mental health as it relates to religion. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Feel free to go to my YouTube page at Evolving with Uncle D. If you go to Evolving with Uncle D, YouTube, just do what they always say. Subscribe, hit the bell, all those three things they say to do. Share it with someone else because this is about evolving. I was talking to a friend of mine that I went to college with, and all her children grew up on Uncle Devin's music. And it is hilarious because they sent me a video about 6 7 months ago. One of her daughters is like 25, 26, and she was in the kitchen listening to Uncle Devin's I Like Onions and was jamming to my music. And they still listen to my music. And I'm sure they share it with their children and their nephews and nieces and all of that. Um, so that's what this is all about. It's about evolving because many people have evolved with me, and that's what I want to be able to evolve with you. It's about either you're programmed or you're aware, and I'm hoping to help people get to that space where they become aware and get rid of the programming that stunts their ideas and their thoughts. And certainly that's where I have been. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, I am Uncle D. Thank you for joining us this morning. And today I want to have a conversation with you about a book that I wrote. It's called An Appeal to the African Church in America, Beware of False Prophets. But I'm not talking about money, or people rather. I'm talking about money. This is a book that I wrote which challenges the status quo and the fact that I was very discontented coming out of college when I realized that you know, a lot of things that were happening in the world, I didn't learn this in the church that I grew up in, and so I went back fired up. I was upset. I was ready to challenge a few things, and so I just want to see. I want to talk a little bit more about how we can focus on that. So anyway, let's just get started. I want to open up first and foremost. One of my biggest concerns, about the black church in particular, is the fact that we give so much power to those who call themselves ministers, pastors, ministers, or what have you. Um, there's a study, been several studies, but I'm looking at one that came out that was this website, is BET's website, And on February 8th, 2022, they had a study that said that Black pastors say they are overwhelmed with people coming to them for mental health care. The new study finds Black folks will see mental health professionals, but their pastors must agree first. And I want to talk about the danger of this, because it's not only just that mental health aspect of it, but this has an impact on all aspects of health: mental, spiritual, and physical. Um, Historically, the Black minister has been given an immense level of power, which goes back to the days of slavery. It was the minister who, people became ministers, and they were set aside and they were given privileges by the slave master if they were projecting the aspect of religion that they had recommended. So somehow there's been this status. And I grew up in the AME Zion Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. But the danger, one of the reasons why I left the church in general, not just the AME Zion Church, but churches in general, is because I don't believe in a theocracy. I don't believe where the vast majority of people go and they're waiting to listen to a word from one person who will tell them what to do. And if you think about it, look at what all the things that we put on a minister to do, especially in the Black community or in the African community. We want them to marry us, to bury us, to pray for us, to teach us, to guide us, to be there 24/7. And it is absolutely insane to think that someone can do all of that in this particular capacity. 98% of every congregation is made up of the everyday people. We call them lay people in the AME Zion Church and others. They're the lay people. But yet we acquiesce to just the will of one or two or a small handful of people. This is what is the biggest issue in modern day society, in a capitalist society. And it's very, very dangerous, because what happens many times is people will enter the church and they will leave their brain at the door and just wait for the minister to tell them what to do. I was working. I had created this campaign at a church that I was going to at the time. It was called Churches United for the People, and we had it was the church that we went to. I went and connected with and reached out to about 25 churches in that particular area, and my goal was this: we need a church that looks out for the interests of the masses of the people. So what did I do? I went. Every church may have a strength in a certain area. One might have a great AIDS ministry. One might have a great daycare. One might have a focus on senior care, or whatever the case may be. So instead of each church trying to do each one of those programs themselves, let's unify and let's get all of those. Each individual church will, if you have a specialty in a certain area, all those other churches will go to you for that, and then the other churches will go to other people for that, or what have you. And then we had gotten a new pastor at the church that we went to, and the moment that they came, they said, "Well, there's no need to even do that anymore, because too many pastors have their own egos, so we won't be doing that." But what that did for me was, I should not, and I was really mad at myself, because I don't need to get the permission from any other person, man, woman, whomever, to do what I know that needs to be done for our community. And so I decided to, when I came out of college and I was coming out of the student movement, I decided to do some writing, and that's what I want to talk to you about right now. The information that's in my book, the an appeal to the African church in America, beware of false prophets. You can find this. You can go to churchappeal.com, or DevonLWalkerBooks.com. Both will take you to the site where you can find the information here. And I'm just going to give you some excerpts about this and kind of relate it to what's going on, just for a few minutes, of what we are speaking about today. I had 5 reasons why I wrote this book. And first of all the document, this is all part of my this was part of my evolution at that particular time. But one of the most disturbing facts uncovered in my time at that time was about 15 years of my study, both the study and practice is the reality that the church has become nothing more than a supporter of the status quo in the United States and the world. In fact, we know that religion was born of the people and has historically been used by humanity as a tool to address their moral, spiritual, and material needs, and for the development of new ideas. However, many church leaders have sacrificed the principles of the religion they serve in exchange for privileged status in the United States. The history of the African church or the Black church in the United States will show that while it played a role in the struggle against segregation in North America and against chattel slavery back in the day, it has done very little to support the people of African descent fighting for their freedom and human dignity throughout the world. So my first appeal when I was writing this book was because I was a member of the AME Zion Church, and the AME stands for African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. There's both an AME and an AME Zion Church. One has its origins in New York, the other one in Philadelphia. Uh, my appeal was to request that the AME Zion Church not forget that the A in its name stands for Africa, the land of our ancestral home. Um, Somewhere in the church's 200 plus years of history, the AME Zion Church, as well as the African church in America, has become disconnected politically to the struggle of Africa to free itself from the grips of neo-colonialism. And a lot of the posts that you see me put up really is connected to this. When we start talking about blackface minstrelsy, and when we talk about the role of children's music being used to continue racist ideology, it's all connected. And the more you follow my page, the more you will see this connection as we continue to go on. So my first reason for writing my book was to encourage the church to make sure that they don't forget that the A stands for Africa. The second reason why I wrote my book is to qualify some of the positions and the opinions that I wrote about in my previous issues of what I call the Kemet Report. This all comes out of a newsletter that I started in the early 1990s. When I stood up at a district conference in Washington, D.C., to protest the silence that the church it has on many of the issues going on around the world. It was not uncommon to go to a church conference, be there all weekend long, and there's no conversations about what was going on, either about gun violence, about poverty, homelessness. At that time, the Iraqi war, we wouldn't talk about that. Not anything that was talking about what was going on in Haiti or things that were going on the continent of Africa. No connections on that whatsoever. And so I stood up and I spoke out at this conference. And I just always got to lift up the late Bishop J. Clinton Hogarth, who was sort of like a mentor to me, that took me underneath his wing. But he challenged me and said, "So what are you going to do about it?" And I've been answering that question ever since. I've been writing, I've been organizing, I've been trying to harmonize my theory with practice as I continue to go on. And so, and let's see, okay, just making sure I don't miss any comments there. So the first reason was to make sure that the church did not forget about Africa. My second reason for writing this book is to qualify some of the positions and the opinions that I wrote about in previous issues of the Kemet Report. I started a newsletter in the church. It became very popular. The Kemet Report was really, as I mentioned, it was information that can take on a life. It took on a life of its own. And the last 12 years, I mean, I was getting subscriptions from people around the country and the world, and I was talking about some of the things that you're hearing about now, but I was dealing with the origins of religion that took us back to the continent of Africa. I was dealing with the issues of a war. I was dealing with issues of monopolization of industries such as the defense contracts and aerospace defense contractors, of course, and who controlled the media and who controlled the food. And therefore, I republished old articles of the Kemet Report in this book. And at the end of each one, I would kind of qualify them and let you know what ideas or what areas that I have grown from at that particular point. So after each article, I would clarify those points that may have changed or been enhanced through experience and exposure. So that was my second reason for writing my book, An Appeal to the African Church of America. In America, beware of false prophets. But I was speaking of money, not people. The third reason I wrote the book is to finally share with those who supported the Kimmett Report the reason why I actually stopped writing those newsletters. Um, it was around that time that I uh, remember going to see going to hear a lecture. I worked in a Pan African organization, and we worked alongside another organization called the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And one of its members what do you call it? Central committee members was the great Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael, whom I've had the opportunity to organize with through these organizations. Well, it was there that after hearing him speak and talk about the importance of organization, I decided that it was good that what I was doing as an individual with the Kimmett Report, but I decided to use my resources to help build a newsletter within the Pan African sector. And so I stopped doing the newsletter because at the time I really felt, and I still feel that way to some extent. Uh, I felt that it was important for me to use it in a greater collective process instead of just me doing it individually. In hindsight, I still could have done both, and I wish I would have done both. Um, but I still learned so much throughout the process. I don't have any regrets at all. Things happen for a reason. But that was the third reason. I just wanted to make sure that I let people know why I even stopped doing the Kimmett Report at the time. My fourth reason for writing this appeal was to wage an active political action campaign within the church, starting with the AME Zion Church denomination. It was my hope to urge as many religious organizations as possible to endorse, at that time, what I called the Blood-Stained Banner campaign. I had started a campaign where every time I walked into a church, I had a white sheet with red paint on it that represented the blood of innocent people that were dying because of our silence. And I was asking other churches to sign on to this Bloodstained Banner campaign. I kept saying that, too many times, and again, I wasn't just trying to attack ministers, but because the masses of the people have given ministers so much power, I have to go there because I've taken a lot of this information. I've had conversations with many, many, many ministers. They love these types of conversations. They've been doing a lot of study, and they don't always get to do a deep dive like this. So I was a young 20-something-year-old researcher that attracted a lot of theologians, and they allowed me to come in and we would study. Many of the things that I talk about in my book, many of the things that I talk about in my posts, they believe, but they will not talk about it publicly because they know that the moment that they do, they will potentially lose their congregations or will feel the wrath of society. They don't want to go, they love Dr. King, but they don't want to end up like Dr. King. Let's put it like that. And so I was in these meetings with them. I would talk with them, and it became, it was, I would ask them to join these different campaigns. The Bloodstained Banner campaign was one. I have a picture of it. I'll have to post it on one of my. I'll send it in so I can post it into one of my social media campaigns real soon. But that was that was my fourth reason, to get the churches to take an active position. And then my final reason for writing this appeal was to help reinvigorate the objective of Pan-Africanism back into the church. You see, when the churches first separated from the white churches who wouldn't allow them to pray and who would discriminate against them, coming out of the churches in the 1700s, um, many churches started their own, and a lot of organizations recognized our African ancestry. So you had the African Methodist Episcopal and the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. You had the African Free Society. You had all these different organizations that recognized our ancestry. Of course, that would lead all the way up to Marcus Garvey in the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and his Back to Africa movement, and even more. And so uh, it was my goal to really focus on liberation theology and the social gospel. And there were so many ministers and laity in the United States who played a part in the development of Pan Africanism, including the Reverend David Walker, not Devin Walker, but the Reverend David Walker, with the David Walker Appeal. If you don't know anything about that, you got to look up the Reverend David Walker Appeal. I would do a post on that because that needs and deserves its own attention. The Reverend Nat Turner and the Bishop Alexander Walters of the AME Zion Church, and even Sister Harriet Tubman, who at one point was a member of the AME Zion Church. And see, religion and Africa go hand in hand. This is because Africa represents the birthplace of not just all religions, but of all humanity. This appeal that I was putting forth showed how the divisions among people of African descent and between African people and other oppressed people around the world represent one of the greatest obstacles toward achieving a world where poverty, homelessness, and social decadence is eliminated. We have to fight against that. And Pan-Africanism, therefore, must be a part of the objective. It's not a principle, it's an objective of every religious and spiritual organization within our families. And so those are the 5 reasons why I wrote the book. And I just want to share one piece that kind of relates to something that came out yesterday, and then I won't keep you long. Many have saw that in Louisiana, the Louisiana's 10 Commandment law, it says that the state's Republican governor signed a measure requiring taxpayer financed schools to prominently post a specific version of the commandments by January 1st. Okay. Um, and it says the law, and I'm reading from the Washington Post, yesterday's Washington Post. The law signed by Governor Jeff Landry, Republican, Wednesday, is the first one of its kind in the country since 1980, when more moderate Supreme Court ruled in similar Kentucky law. It ruled that a similar Kentucky law was unconstitutional. The new law gives until January 1st to display the 10 Commandments on a poster or frame document that is at least 11 inches by 14 inches in every classroom. The commandments have to be displayed central focus and be printed on large, easily readable font, the law says. So I certainly know that that's not a separation of church and state. What I'm frustrated with and what I'm going to be really jumping on and focusing on a lot is these folks who use their religious might, because they're a little more organized than we are, to impose their will on the masses of the people here in the United States. Certainly, people should have the right to believe what they believe, but to force using taxpayer dollars for that, to me, is wrong. And I'm gonna jump to a part of my book where I talked about let's see, where was it at? The Not the monopoly of capitalism. I was dealing with Christianity in Africa. I want you to check something out. I'm just going to read something that I wrote. This was in my book, and I'm going to get the actual page. I focused on the 10 Commandments, and I was looking at the African origins of the 10 Commandments. If you go to page 87 and 88 of my book, I'm just going to read a section of that so you can hear what I had to say. And I have a solution for my people in Louisiana. If you want to confront this, there's a way that you can do it that makes sure that we focus on our history. I stated in my book, and I'm quoting, the 10 Commandments were not new to the world when Moses, according to scripture, received them from Mount Sinai. They were known to the ancient Egyptians, or Cometians, centuries before his birth. In fact, they were just part of what was known as the Negative Confessions, written nearly 1,350 years before Moses. Now, according to Reverend Ashaka Musa Barashango, the 10 Commandments, quote, were known as the 147 Negative Confessions, as set forth in the 125th chapter of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, end quote. Moses not only received the commandments from the Egyptians, he was taught by them as well. One of his teachers was the great pharaoh Amenephis, better known as Akhenaten, the heretic king, living about 1,350 years before Jesus. Akhenaten was regarded as the first Messiah and most remarkable of the pharaohs. Akhenaten was one of the first to practice what we let me go back to practice monotheism, the belief in one God, and revolutionized the Egyptian religion by worshiping the sun's disk, what they called Aton, Aton. Up until this time, there were many graven images being worshipped and a strong belief in polytheism, the belief in many deities. Now, historian J.A. Rogers states 1,000 years before Moses wrote the second commandment banishing graven images of God, Akhenaten did so. Known as an outstanding poet, much of Akhenaten's poetry is contained in the book of Psalms. So you're looking at the book of Psalms, you're looking at a lot of the poetry that came from this African leader. Rogers writes, Psalms that read like the Bible, like those of the Bible, were written by a pharaoh, Amenephis the fourth. I think that's the fourth. I always get my Roman numerals backwards. Better known as Akhenaten, the heretic king, 1300 BC or more than 400 years before David was born. Akhenaten was extremely Negro in type. That means he was of color, had some pigmentation. You know what I mean? They're going to try to deny that because they're still trying to isolate Egypt as if it's not in Africa, and it is. And most of the Egypt has its origins coming not from the north in Europe, but coming up through Central Africa, through Sudan, and through the central part of Africa. So Akhenaten will eventually be killed by the enemies of his day, but his philosophy did not die. A young Egyptian priest named Moshe, a disciple of Akhenaten, picked up the cause of following the practices of monotheism, one God, or a tone code, and fled out of Egypt where it was being suppressed. As mentioned above, Moses was an Egyptian. This may come to a surprise for most people, but his very name, Moses, is an Egyptian rather than a Jewish name. In fact, he was educated in Egypt by the Egyptians. Noted historian and philosopher George G.M. James stated that, quote, all the great leaders of the great religions of antiquity were initiates of the Egyptian mystery system. From Moses, who was an Egyptian, who was an Egyptian hierogrammat, down to Christ. End quote. So I that's on pages 80, what did I say, 87 and 88 of my book, where you can read more about that. 87 and 88. And so I find it very interesting that, so for those of you all that are in Louisiana and forced to do this 10 commandment law, I say put up the Egyptian Book of the Dead, put up the negative confessions, because that's where it has its origin. Even Dr. King told us about the fact that how you going to talk about Christianity and not talk about the religions that existed before it. It's sort of like talking about the ocean and not talking about the tributaries that feed it. You can't disconnect that. They all are there. And Dr. King specifically talked about 5 different religions in a paper that he wrote when he was in theology school. But he talked about the religion of Osiris and Isis. And a lot of this coming from, and a lot of this is coming from that particular knowledge. So my folks in Louisiana, if you want to fight this law, one way to do it, put up the negative confessions, and just say, hey, we're doing what you said, but we're going to the origin. We're not going to what I say has been either plagiarized or stolen from Mother Africa. We're going to go back to the source. Go ahead and challenge them. I have some fun with that. They're going to be upset with that. But for me, this is one of the reasons why I wrote the book. It has so much other information in here. I mean, I spent pretty much my whole 20s just doing research. If I was in college, I probably would have had a PhD by now. But my whole point, coming back to when I was talking about the ministers, is that to all of you that do go to church, I'm begging you, I'm actually imploring that it's good to go and to be there, but don't wait and allow. Don't put that pressure on all of these ministers to do all these things for you. I'm looking at my brother, Reverend Mark Thomas, my little brother. And I mean, why put all that on Mark? Why are we gonna put all that just on you? You need people to step up. You need people to add to the discourse. You all are the ministers know, and they have a better knowledge typically of scripture, and you should go to them for that. But why would you wait and try to get them to tell you when you should do things, when you should be active? Um, you're waiting for them, according to this BET article, you're waiting for the pastors to give you the permission or to encourage you to go seek mental health counseling. I mean, a study showed that half of the ministers say that they feel inadequate trying to address the mental health issues in our community. We need for you to put on your own thinking cap and think for yourself and work and work for yourself in this particular area, because many pastors are suffering mentally, physically, with diabetes and all the stress that comes with all these different things, because we're putting all this pressure on them. We have to change. If we want to get out of, if we want true liberation in our community, we have to change the dynamics that's happening in the Black church. The lay people are the most important people in the church. You take the people away, you have no church. Even Jesus himself owes his existence to the masses of the people, because, of course, as the scripture says, if the people were not sinning, he would not have had a reason to come back. So either way, the masses of the people are the most important. And this is really what I want to stress to everyone today, that we have to change these particular dynamics. Is very dangerous. It's very dangerous for us to continue to in the same practice of just giving somebody the power just because they've been elevated to a position of a pastor. Many of you won't listen to things that I have to say, because I don't have that title. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. I'm not a professor. There's some people right in your congregation that have answers, but we won't give them the time of day, because they don't have that particular title. And we're doing a disservice in our community. And so for me, and I'm looking with what Mark said, the Black pastor has become an amalgamation of leadership from African society. We are the griot, and the patriarchal leader and the medicine man. It's too much. Yeah, thanks, Mark. And it is, Mark. I worry about you. And Mark, my father was his godfather and was his assistant pastor. And I would talk to Dad a lot about, hey, you can't take on all of this. And to some respect, Mark, I would tell Dad that I know he wanted to be a pastor, a lead pastor of a church at a certain time. But I said, Dad, it's actually a blessing in disguise that you're not. You can probably actually do more as an assistant pastor without all those pressures of being the lead pastor, and still and still really make a contribution. So I'm saying that we need to really elevate this. And again, this is not an attack on all ministers. Of course, that would be foolish. This is just looking at the institution of the church in general. If you are a member of a church, you are a part of and you're not part of the leadership, you're part of the lay council, laity. You have a responsibility. You just can't be a card carrying member. You need to find your space. There's something that you do specifically, but we need to, as an organization, you shouldn't wait for the church to make a decision that what's going on in Israel and Palestine is wrong. The masses of the people should have made that decision. I'm grateful that in the AME Zion Church, the Board of Bishops decided to speak out and send a letter to Biden to ask for a ceasefire. But as I showed in this book in the 1990s, I made that request years ago, not just a ceasefire, but I asked the church to stand up and fight against Zionism. There's a difference between Zion and Zionism. And um and it, so for me, I was honored when I finally saw the church really come out publicly against that, because I know that there's been a long, protracted struggle to get the church to get to that particular state. So Um, um, and so yeah, Mark, you on vacation? Okay, I forgot. My mom did tell me you was on vacation. Yeah, that's why I'm on vacation right now, listening to this blessing. And your dad was much more than a pastor. He was yeah. You know, we just got through Father's Day. We just got through his birthday on June 1st. Yeah. So thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. So I just wanted to share a little bit with you about this today, because it's, and I'm going to be talking more about what I have in my books. Because I don't think that the research that I've done has gotten the attention that it deserves. Um, and I'm just going to ask that if you don't like my writing, if you disagree with the content, that's one thing. But most people haven't even gotten to that point. They won't even look at it because I don't have that title of a pastor. I don't have the title of a politician. I don't have the title of a professor, and we do ourselves a disservice. Focusing only on people that have titles is a capitalistic view of of looking at things, and we will continue to suffer. It is the masses of the people that is always primary. And so, with that, I'm checking to see if there's any other comments or questions here. But I really appreciate this opportunity to share with you more information to those ministers that are out there that are listening. Take care of yourself. You have to set some boundaries and empower your congregation to do what they talk to them about the importance that they are the most important thing in the church, not the pastor, the people. The people are the most important. Franz Fanon said that we must relentlessly and passionately teach the people that everything depends on them. And that is what is most important right now. So without the people, there will be no pastors. There will be almost no nothing, because everything starts there. So I'm going to end it here. I want to thank everyone for spending a little time with me today. I got some other posts coming up. Thank you all. You all have really loved that Memorial Day post. I think the last I saw, we were close to 125,000 views, and I will be doing a follow up on that real soon. Someone asked me if there was a way that they can hold up, or is there a flag or something that we can hold up for Memorial Day? Um, and I said, and thank you, Kimberly, I will do that. And so I said, yes, there was actually an abolitionist flag. There was an abolitionist flag, and I'm doing some more research for it. I want to make sure I get all my facts straight. But I'm looking at next Memorial Day, focusing on the abolitionist struggle and uh, thanking those who fought against slavery. I don't care what their race was. I don't care where they lived. Anyone that stood up against that institution is what the original intent of Memorial Day was all about. And I'm going to be putting information out about that. You can get more information about the book. You can go to Church Appeal. I created that website years ago, and I've always kept it. You can go to churchappeal.com or DevonLWalkerBooks.com. What's the matter, Kim? You can put it in chat. If you go to and I know this is called An Appeal to the African Church in America, Beware of False Prophets. There's another book that I have, which I got to get more physical copies of it. And Brother Mark, I've been hearing that you've been using this also from time to time in your studies, so I appreciate it. Um, the Way of the Gentiles. And to me, all of these so-called religious right folks that are wanting to talk about certain things and want to promote their version of religion, they don't want to talk about this. They don't want to talk about Matthew chapter 10, verse 5 and 6, and what that really means. And that's what this book is all about, that one particular passage. And we'll come to that at another time. So let's see. I see one other comment. Let's see what we got in here. Okay. So thank you all so much. I wish you all stay healthy, stay cool. I have an outdoor show to do tomorrow. Oh my God, at 10:30 in the morning. And they're talking about at 7 in the morning it's gonna be 80 degrees, but I'm gonna be out in Fairfax County Parks. But we rocking for the children. So you can go to the Uncle Devin show if you want to find more information and look at our calendar there. Thank you all so much. Love each and every one of you. And as I always say, just remember that life is a drum. So beat it.